Hi, everybody. Today we're going to learn a little bit about Wilhelm Wundt and the current day perspectives of psychology. So this information is in your packet. However, I'm going to be going through some of the examples, and you might want to jot down anything that helps you with remembering these. It's one thing for me to go through my notes, but it's another for you to actually process it and write things down. So first off, Wilhelm Wundt is German. He actually is considered the father of psychology, and he created the first lab in 1879. In your book, it talked about his very simple lab. Basically, there was a bell, sound of some sort, and the participants had to press a button to kind of like time how quickly their internal processes took to hear the bell and then cognitively say, oh, I need to press the button. So this was the first kind of psychology lab that was using science in order to measure thinking. So we're talking about perspectives, and perspectives are kind of ways that we look at behavior. Structuralism and functionalism are two of the early perspectives that are no longer around, but they are still up here on the test, and they are important because they kind of pave the way for other current day perspectives. So Wilhelm Wundt was a structuralist, and what structuralism believes is basically you use introspection to look at structural elements of the human mind. Basically, if I were to say, can you describe what a cat looks like, okay? You're gonna then describe the structure of a cat. However, there is a flaw with structuralism because structuralism can be too subjective because not everyone views information the same way. So I might say a couple things about a cat, and it might be different. Or what the taste is of something. If you ever argued over what a taste or of a flavor or color is like, it's too open-ended. And so this ended up being kind of morphed into the current day cognitive theme. He used something called introspection. Introspection is basically looking inward, having people kind of think about their own thought process. This is kind of how he, again, explored the brain and the mind. I give some examples here. What is the structure of salt? What is the structure of a computer? What is the structure of a body? Again, you can name off all of the lists of, for instance, salt is NaCl. That's the chemical compound, okay? And structure of a computer, you can start naming up all the things that are in a computer. However, if you have no experience with a computer, you don't know what a motherboard is, you don't know what RAM is, and you don't know what there's a fan, and so on and so forth, okay? So again, it's too subjective, and so they ended up getting rid of this. But again, Wilhelm Wundt, father of psychology, all right? And he is a structuralist, that's important. Again, introspection is looking inward. I call this similar to metacognition, thinking about thinking. Basically, if you've ever thought about why you're thinking something or how you're thinking something and it drives you crazy, that is basically introspection. Or if someone ever had you think about how did you feel in a certain situation and why did you say that, that's introspection. And it uses self-talk, which is a conscious experience, and we all have that self-talk with ourselves, and sometimes we end up talking to ourselves out loud accidentally. All right, so a couple more memes. If you haven't figured that out, I like memes, okay? Turn down for what? All right, so anyways, I like this little picture here about learning, thinking, learning about learning, and then thinking about thinking. I really like that because one of the best ways that people learn is by thinking about what they just learned and then teaching it to somebody else. So again, the way that I've learned psychology the best is by thinking about different ways to explain it, right? So I've actually learned it a lot better than just sitting in a classroom. And again, through years of experience. All right, next, William James, okay? He is wrote the first textbook in psychology, and he actually, again, is a functionalist, and William James he basically, what functionalism believes is how do you use something? How do you use something? What is the use of it? Like how can I use salt? So I could use it for seasoning. I could use it for, ice. I can use it for preserving food. How do we use a computer? Well, it's different for each person, but again, I could observe someone doing it. And I give you this nice little chart here that kind of explains it. Again, functionalism is similar to behaviorism now. It no longer exists. You do have to know that William James is a functionalist, okay? And that, again, it's kind of an early behaviorist. All right, so next, a couple more memes for you. So the next current day perspectives, and I've given you all this in your notes, but I kind of want to walk you through what a perspective is. So a perspective, again, is a way of thinking about behavior. Not only is it a way of thinking about behavior, but it's also a way that we potentially could solve a problem. Note that when you go to a doctor, there's not just one way of looking at the body. There could be different symptoms that one doctor might look at versus another. And so again, I think of the perspective as like a microscope. Each lens has a different view, and some lenses are going to be better for certain specimens, and then some lenses are going to be not as good with certain specimens. So again, that microscope is going to give us a different view of behavior. For instance, when looking at depression, each lens may point to a specific cause of a disorder or treatment of a disorder, and some might be better than others. So I've given you kind of some key words here. So for your test, you're going to have multiple choice with prompts that have kind of these key words, and then you're going to have to tell me that, oh, it says brain, that's going to be neuroscience. That's that perspective, okay? So neuroscience, neurobiological is probably the newest field, obviously, because with the birth of technology and scans, we are able to know what happens in the brain, know about the nervous system, reflexes, certain neurotransmitters, drugs that affect it, and again, hormones. Note, DNA is not something that I would consider with neuroscience because the DNA is connected with other areas. So evolutionary is going to be, like we know with Charles Darwin, changes over time to help survival of the fittest, okay? Again, evolutionary, we're seeing change over time. That does connect with psychological behaviors. Why do we have certain fears? Why do we have certain behaviors that help us with survival? Behavior genetics has to do with epigenetics, how environment affects DNA. Epigenetics basically says that you turn on and off genes due to environmental influences. So some people may come down with a disorder because of environmental stressors trigger a genetic background. Or here's another thing, is some people can get sick and have no genetic background, but yet the environment is a strong influence on their behavior. Next, psychodynamic. Actually, really one quick thing before I go on to psychodynamic. Note, epigenetics is not speeding up evolution. It is for 1 or 2 generations. For instance, whatever you eat, drink, or smoke right now could influence your offspring even though you're not even pregnant, or even produce a sperm that might impregnate someone. Again, these are things that influence our biological code, and then this can trigger changes in us as well as our offspring. Next, psychodynamic. Psychodynamic has to do with, again, the unconscious, subconscious, traumatic childhood events. Notice it has to do with, again, unconscious is going to be the key word. So Freud, he believed that we stored painful experiences that we don't want to talk about in our unconscious mind. We'll talk more about that later. Behavioral talks about environment, rewards, reinforcement, punishment, conditioning, learning, and from observation. So this is a big thing, and notice I gave you the people that are also from your textbook from the first chapter that I tell you who are the main people, and we'll talk more about these people later. So behavioral, again, has to do with I, as a teacher, am encouraging you to learn through rewards, or you get spanked because you did something wrong. That would be an example of behavioral. Cognitive has to do with thinking, memory, mental processes, metacognition, it comes back here, and introspection, again, thinking about thinking. Social cultural is similar to the overlap with sociology, looking at religion, ethnicity, groups of people, collectivism, individualism, and gender. We do know that these things have an influence on behavior, but in general, psychology focuses on the individual, not necessarily the group, but the group can influence the individual, and that's where we see social cultural. Humanistic is going to be, they're kind of the hippies of the psychology world. They believe that in order for you to be self-actualized, the best you possibly can be, and to climb up the hierarchy of needs, you need to have unconditional positive regard. Love that from someone that supports you no matter what. They also believe that people are kind of born naturally good. The humanistic perspective directly rebels against the psychodynamic and psychoanalytic perspective up here. And the cognitive and behavioral perspective also kind of rebel against each other. The biggest criticism of the behavioral perspective as well, it doesn't talk about thinking. So we're, again, they kind of, sometimes these have two different ways of looking at behavior. All right, and the last one, the most current one, is eclectic biopsychosocial. This is the most current approach, and again, it's a combination of biology, thinking, and social environment, and eclectic means that it's a combination of all of them. So what you're going to be doing is today in class or tomorrow in class, you're going to be thinking of a person that you're going to be analyzing. It doesn't have to be a real person. It can be, and I give you this as an example, it could be a cartoon character, it could be a comic book character, but what you're going to be doing is analyzing their behavior based on the different perspectives. Basically, you are going to be analyzing why this person does certain things based on the humanistic perspective, psychoanalytic perspective, and going from there. So again, that's what you're going to be doing in class. So make sure that you are familiar with the perspectives above.